If your television broke today, what would you do? Would you try to fix it? Or would you just replace it? For most people, the answer is obvious. You'd throw it away and buy a new one. Not because you want to, but because that's how things work now. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when repairing your television wasn't just common, it was expected. When the picture started rolling, or the sound cut out, or the screen suddenly went black, you didn't think about buying a new one. You picked up the phone and called the repair shop. Sometimes the repairman would come straight to your house. He'd arrive carrying a worn toolbox and a small case filled with vacuum tubes. He'd walk into your living room, kneel down in front of the television, and carefully remove the back panel. And what he revealed looked nothing like today's technology. Inside was a maze of glass tubes, wires, and components, each tube glowing faintly orange when the set was on. It looked alive. He would begin testing them one by one, pulling one out, checking it, replacing it, moving to the next. Sometimes the fix was simple. A single tube had burned out. He'd swap it, close the panel, and just like that, your television was back. Other times the problem was more complicated. That's when you'd load the television into your car and take it to the shop. These shops weren't big or fancy. They were small, local storefronts, the kind of place you'd walk past every day without thinking twice. Inside, there was usually a front counter, and behind it, a cluttered workspace filled with half-repaired TVs, coils of wire, tools and parts stacked everywhere. The air smelled like dust and hot solder. Behind the counter stood someone who knew exactly what they were doing. You described the issue. Maybe the picture was fuzzy, maybe there was no sound, maybe it only worked sometimes. They'd listen carefully, nod, and write everything down. Then you'd leave your TV there and wait. A few days later, maybe a week, you'd come back, and most of the time, it was fixed. The bill might be $15 or $20, sometimes more if something major had failed, but you paid it without hesitation, because your television wasn't cheap. Back then, buying a TV was a big decision, a serious purchase. In the 1950s, 60s, even into the early 80s, a color television could cost hundreds of dollars. Adjusted for today's money, that's thousands. For many families, it was one of the most expensive things in the house. You didn't replace something like that just because it stopped working. You fixed it. And the reason you could fix it was because of how it was built. Televisions at the time used vacuum tubes, glass components that controlled electrical signals. These tubes were modular, meaning they could be removed and replaced easily. If one failed, you didn't need to rebuild the entire system. You just took it out and put a new one in. Some people even did it themselves. There were tube testing machines in drugstores and supermarkets. You could bring in a tube, test it, and buy a replacement right there. It created an entire ecosystem. There were parts suppliers, training schools, service manuals filled with detailed diagrams, and technicians, skilled workers who built careers around fixing televisions. It was steady work, honest work, and it lasted for decades. But then, everything started to change, slowly at first, and then, all at once. The first big shift came with new technology. Vacuum tubes were replaced by transistors and later integrated circuits. These newer systems were smaller, faster, and more reliable. Televisions didn't break as often anymore, but when they did, fixing them became much harder. You couldn't just pull out a faulty part and replace it. Components were now soldered directly onto circuit boards. Diagnosing a problem required specialized tools and much deeper knowledge. The old repair methods didn't work anymore, and many small repair shops couldn't keep up. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The real change came from something else. Price. As manufacturing improved, Televisions became cheaper to produce. Factories moved overseas. Assembly became automated. Parts were made in massive quantities. And the cost dropped fast. A television that once cost hundreds of dollars could now be replaced for much less. By the 1990s, the difference was already noticeable. But in the 2000s, everything changed. Flat-screen TVs entered the market, and suddenly you could buy a brand new television for under $200. That's when the entire system collapsed. Because at that point, repairing a TV didn't make sense anymore. Why spend $80 fixing an old set when you could buy a new one for just a little more? A better one. A bigger one. A newer one. The answer was obvious, and little by little, repair shops began to disappear. Shops that had been part of communities for decades started closing their doors. Technicians retired or found other work. The tools were packed away. The knowledge faded into the background. By the early 2000s, most of them were gone. But what disappeared wasn't just a business. It was a way of thinking. There was a time when people valued the things they owned differently. When something cost a large part of your income, you took care of it, you cleaned it, maintained it, protected it. And when it broke, you fixed it. Because that's what you did with valuable things. But as prices dropped, that mindset changed. Televisions became disposable, just like toasters, just like radios. It wasn't worth the time or effort anymore. And along with that shift, something else quietly disappeared. Connection. When you had something repaired, you knew the person doing the work. You trusted them. They weren't just fixing a machine. They were helping you keep something important alive. Today, that relationship is gone. Now, when something breaks, you don't take it anywhere. You go online, you search, you click, and a replacement arrives at your door. The old one goes to the curb. What we lost wasn't just repair shops. It was a network of people who understood how things worked. People who could listen to a problem and fix it with their hands. That kind of knowledge still exists, but now it's rare. Found in small communities, hobbyists, collectors. Not in every neighborhood like it once was. Maybe this change was inevitable. When labor costs more than manufacturing, repair stops making sense. That's just economics, but it's still worth understanding what we lost. Because for most of human history, fixing things was normal. Replacing them wasn't, and in just a few decades, that flipped completely. Now, replacement is the default. It made technology cheaper, easier, more accessible, but it also changed how we see the things we own, and maybe how we value them. So the next time something breaks, it's worth asking, is it really broken, or have we just forgotten how to fix it?